All right. Welcome everyone at the next Multi-Network Community Sync. Today is December 9th, and I have one topic just to continue the discussion from last week. Uh, if anyone has some other topic, please feel free to add them. I link the doc in the chat. You can hear me all right? Because I'm not sure when I'm speaking to myself.
Yes, we
Yeah,
can hear
sounds
you.
good.
Okay, thank you. So I think from last time we talked, I think we started looking into an idea of simplification for the pod network, considering um, at least the two implementations we talked about, and there is the third one from Isovalent, I think, as well, that we already have some sort of object for definition for our specific implementations, right? Where do I look at it? I don't think I see it. So because of that, is there a point or is there a need? I think that was the kind of question. Is there a need to standardize how do we do those networks, which we always pushed back on? I think from the last comments from Antonio, we want to change that, but I think to better I think the answer for Antonius will be to better identify what the pod network is for, rather than defined as a standardization of how the network looks like, right? I think that's the kind of one of the um, aspects of this. And what I mean by that is to specify pod network as not a standard of what a pod network is but just it is a representation of it so that we can point to it if we want to build the future Kubernetes integration against it, right? So what I'm thinking here about is, for example, the serviceability, right? On to how do I kind of point if I have a multi-home, multi-network pod, how do I point to a specific set of interfaces of pods when I want to do a service in front of it, right? So how do I group that? So if you think about a pod today, when you think about service today, it has a pod selector and basically it is placed in a specific namespace. That's how you identify which pods to select. With multi-network, what the initial idea behind this is the uh, what I want to say, have a service in front of a specific set of interfaces of a pod, right? That's kind of the, at least this is what at Google, when we did something, implemented something internally for services, is what we considered to go by, rather than, I don't know, which might be tricky when you think about this. If you have a multi-network pod, and created a service in front of multiple interfaces of a single pod, that's kind of might be counterintuitive, right? Because services pod is for the reason of having redundancy, so multiple pods. And now you selecting the same set of interfaces from that pod, I don't think that has a meaning. And for that reason, I think the point of this would be to be able to as well sub-select specific interfaces of a pod and how to do that. And basically, that's what the pod network object would be, right? To be able to identify which pod network do I deal about, right? So so this is how the REST infrastructure will then be able to integrate with multi-network, right? Because what would happen if I have a pod with multiple interfaces, I can then identify via pod network which interface is what, right? And then I would use the pod network object for that, so that in any other like serviceability implementation, I could reference that pod network, so that I would have my namespace, my selectors, my label selectors, and then lastly the pod network to fully identify, all right, I want to target those specific set of interfaces, right? That will be the kind of explanation of why we need the pod network, and it will not be a part of a standardization of how the pod network has to look like or what they have to implement. Thoughts?
I think that makes a lot of sense to me. Like the being able to select an interface of a specific pod for service packet is something we've also discussed in Isovalent. We never actually implemented a solution for this. I guess kind of one thing that I just realized is that if you use the pod network as the as a handle for the interface, that also means that two interfaces cannot be on the same network, which might be a totally fine limitation. It's just something like that just came to mind because we discussed it elsewhere at Isovalent recently.
And that's something that it didn't come to. It's basically what at Google we blocked that, right, as well.
Yeah.
Explicitly for that like when you think about this, it's counterintuitive. It's what would happen then. You would, let's say we have this and we group the interfaces that way. To some other folks here might not have what we are referring to is I have two pods, and the one pod has default network and then blue network, and then the other pod has two interfaces from blue network, and I create a service in front of that from like basic thing, the service will see three interfaces, one from the first pod and two from the other pod. Basically, it will work if you think about this. If your IPAM and the whole kind of routing and connectivity is enabled, that should work. The only problem is that your load balancing is then skewed towards the pod with two interfaces because the weight is different, right? Then because if it's random, depending on what you're doing, even random or any other mechanism of redistribution, but then you kind of are breaking the load between the pods, right? So that's why we are saying that I think it's up to implementation. Again, I would push back on that anyway. I would not want to standardize and push on anyone, oh, you have to implement this that way, right? But I think that's some sort of a recommendation that if you were to allow multiple interfaces from multiple networks and try to put services on it, then you would have run into this. Keep in mind that when you think about like the AI/ML workloads, they don't care. They don't need any services in front of their RDMA interfaces, for example, and they want to have multiple interfaces from the same network, yes, to the pod, right? So they don't care about that kind. So there are use cases where multiple interfaces from the same network is viable, right? For whatever reason you want to do. Any other questions to this? So should we then push that? Any other comments? And then if we are moving that one, as usual work. What happens is the pod network is very bare bones, right? I was thinking about this, and like the pod network looks like this, right? But what I would want to do is then the view of the network. Maybe if I have a network like this, right? Getting back to this. So I've like enabled, I think that should go away because enabled network is basically some sort of a functionality of a network, and that should basically, if you need it, put it on your whatever implements it, right? So this is like a function of your implementation. So this is not needed for any of the handling, just for handling explain. So I don't feel this is needed. If someone feels otherwise, please let me know. Then for the provider, this is something that I'm not sure, because what can happen is the provider can be inferred by the referenced object. Think of kind like network Google, right? And basically, if it's a kind network Google, we know who's the provider, right?
But what if there's? I mean, it's a bit hypothetical. But what if then the object ref here is some kind of Multus network attachment definition?
Oh, that. But then there's an implementer, the Multus thing, right?
Yeah, but Multus is kind of an open standard, right? There could be multiple implementations of this.
I think Multus
that
will
kind of provide the bridge between classic Multus and the pod network spec.
I would imagine there will be just the NPWG group folks will just create one implementer, right? Because this is, keep in mind, the implementer. So I'm thinking of let's say Cilium and OVN, right?
Yeah.
Those are the implementers, right? If there will be multiple users of Cilium, let's say, for example, I don't see between Cilium users there will be different providers, right? That's what this means, right? So, and same goes with Multus, right? I would say that if this is kind network Multus, there is just one implementation for it, right? On how this integrates with Multus, right? I don't feel there will be multiple implementers for this. Do you see that, Sebastian?
It's hard to predict the future, right? It sounds a bit like I could imagine a future where we say, there's, or like maybe even migration purposes, right? Where you have some networks that are managed by one provider, but then you want to migrate to another provider. So you switch providers in some networks, but not in all of them yet. It seems a bit kind of, different concerns having the object type.
That is a fair point, right?
Type is always owned by one provider, but I'm not like, again, like this is just like some thought. I don't want to.
So having the field gives us better validation, right? There is that.
Yes.
If I have a example network X and then my controller, and basically then you have your controller saying, oh, okay, I'm owning this pod network, but you referenced the wrong thing. So I can say not ready for this object and sorry, right? But it won't. I will not work for that, right? So that's one thing that the provider gives us, right? Is the ability to validate on, okay, this is an OVN implementation, so it requires a specific kind. And if you didn't provide it or you made a mistake or something, then you have you have to make a conscious decision of who's providing the specific network. And that's maybe good because you make a spelling mistake in your kind of the object, and basically you have in mind OVN, but you copy pasted an isovalent thing or not isovalent or Cilium thing, and then you're using the wrong thing, something else what you meant, right? So there is that aspect, right? So if you have two fields to fill in, then you at least have to be conscious of what you're saying. So I'm not keep in mind that we always can add easily fields. Removing a field is harder.
That is a very good point.
So there is that always. So I would feel so object reference will have a kind, what is it? I will, there is a proper core reference, but basically kind, there will be a, I think, version and then namespace, and those fields will be namespace. So namespace will be definitely optional. So this will be optional, and then the rest I think stays required. The whole object ref will be optional as well, because maybe your implementation doesn't have any extra configuration object, and what you do is you go by name. You link a name to name. A very straightforward implementation where I have network, or maybe I don't need a reference. I just go by provider, CNI or something, or very simple provider, which then goes just by matching the names. That can happen as well. Because keep in mind, the picture that is here, let me maybe show that quickly so that we all are on the same page. This guy, I will just open this presentation, share this tab. And this picture does not change for now, at least, unless we want to rediscuss it. But the array driver that the implementation provides is the one that makes the linkage of what resource to mark versus what is in the pod network, right? So if my implementation doesn't require the extra linkage from pod network and maybe goes by just the name, perfectly fine as well, right? So basically I have a object X here, object X, which is named Blue Network, and my DRA driver understands that and assumes there is a one-to-one mapping by name, right? Someone could do that implementation. Just for fun, that's why I'm saying that the reference can be optional as well, because someone wants to have just a very straightforward thing. Let me get back to this, share this tab quickly. So simple. So enabled, we remove that. I think object reference, this will be a standardized reference for any object in KRM. And then lastly, the provider, let's keep it for the kind of ability to explicitly check for things. And now lastly is the status. Let's talk about status. I think below we talked about, had some example here. That was a spec. So here, those two guys. Do we need to provide, where was I? Here. Do we need to have, I think conditions, this is where you would say what's ready and not. And the only case from the standard, from this group, what would it say? That you have to have a ready condition, and when ready is false, you should remove all the attributes from your resource slices, right? So basically, if that's there, and I will get back to here quickly just to kind of what I mean by that. So if I have a DRA driver and pod network is not ready, I remove all these guys, right, from the resource slice, so that then the attributes are not there. Of course, existing stuff is already linked, so I cannot change that, and this will be called out as well. But I remove my attributes from existing resources across the board when this pod network is false, ready false. That's very straightforward, so that when basically however you make the pod network not ready, then you don't just blindly mark the resource slices, right? And this is coming from the point of the provider at this point. If the provider and the selected object are mismatching, then the object will be not ready, and basically you should not do anything. That's one aspect. The other aspect is that gives implementation a control over when this happens, right? Because you can, there will be a controller coming from the implementation on the readiness, and they make, then they might put some additional gates on where this becomes ready, right? And where it shows up as available network, right? So this is what this can be used as, where basically, let's say I have to, when someone creates pod network and that drives my whole implementation, points to a specific thing, or maybe that's not needed. I maybe any comments on this? Anyone feels one way or the other for that?
Just how if we have a like generic pod network, how this pod network would, the controller would write this condition, or is it the implementation then that have to write this?
No. This will be owned by the implementation, right? At that point,
Right.
unless we say at this point we don't need it because this is so straightforward. The spec is basically nothing, and maybe the conditions are not needed because readiness of the network will be driven by your object if you have that need, right? In terms of like when a network can be available for attachment and for consumption by pods, it's defined by this additional object, not by this, right? We want to move away any functionality from this thing. This is as we called it, it's just a handle for integration, right? So it should not hold any functionality like I was mentioning. Coming around those kind of definition, I think should it have a conditions? Anyone sees?
If the object doesn't exist, like if the user makes a mistake and does an object ref to something that doesn't exist because of a typo, would the condition still be like one use case then could be that the implementation sets the condition to not ready, like invalid object ref, something like that, or would there be another component?
Because that will be the only point for this. Yes, that's what I'm calling out, right? Only if the provider is defined, but the object ref is incorrect, you will just put this guy not ready, so the user knows. This will be okay. So for that reason, I think we can keep it, but it will be used only for that reason. I would not feel that when you put the attribute on the resource slice in the array, whether you gate on that's I think up to implementation on whether they have to do that or not, right? So now, okay, so keeping this, but now this one, the pod siders, I think this one was needed for us to identify what are the pod networks, what I mean, not pod networks, what are the pod siders, apologies. What are the pod siders this pod network uses? But this is again a functionality of your networks. So basically your object, if you need to know that range, that should be part of your own object, right? This is basically function of is that good thinking? Any other comments on that? So basically I'm thinking about not adding this, keeping it simple, just having the conditions.
Yeah. So maybe could you expand a bit what this means? Is this like the pod siders of every node, or
no, not
pod
nodes. So basically think of it how you, because there is multiple ways on how you can attach a sider to a node, right? And for consumptions by a specific network, right? And this, of course, as well boils down to how you do your IPAM for your multi-networking, right? Yeah. But let's think of Multus as a, I think, common denominator across the board. And basically, in Multus, when you create an ad for the CNI, you have two ways. You go by whereabouts, which is basically your cluster-wide CIDR. So basically, you define one specific CIDR that is going to be used by all the pods who connects to that NAD, to that network attachment, right? and think of the network attachment now as a network. We could do that reference, basically saying that blue network points to a specific network attachment. And basically I have this network attachment uses specific CIDR A, let's say, via whereabouts, right? What that means, this whole network uses this pod CIDR, right? Because every pod connecting to that range, to that network, will use that range, right? So this is what I'm defining as a pod network, as a pod CIDR. And if I were to use as an additional example, a different example, if I were to use a host local CIDR, right? What it means, and this is what, like, at least at Google, when we define a host local, we identify a range per node, right? But that per node range comes from a larger chunk, right? Usually. And basically that larger chunk is the pod CIDR, right?
Makes sense.
So there is a node CIDR, basically sub chunk, and there is a node CIDR. Of course, you can have a discontinuous CIDRs per node, and this is why this is a list, right? Because you can then place them here if that's the case, right? The reason for this was to being identifying what are the ranges of IPs that are used by this pod network. But why would, for example, from Google point of view, why would I need this? And this is for if you have a multi-homed pod. This is for routing of when you do inside the pod, right? When I connect an interface for my kind of this data plane pod network, I want to put a route inside the pod to say, you know, for this range of CIDRs, go through that interface, right? So that I have a basic connectivity on that network between the interfaces of that pod network. Otherwise, if you don't do that, inside the pod, your routing will be just pointing to the default network. And depending on how you set up your IP on that specific additional interface, you might not have ability to even exit the pod via that interface, right? So this is what I would use it, or this is how we use it. Anyone knows what is? Oh, no, it dropped. I see we have some influx of some robots coming into the meetings. Okay, so this is what the pod CIDRs will be, but I feel that this is a function of implementation. So I feel this
would also, yeah, I would also, I'm also a bit on the fence here.
What do you think, Lionel? I think you were mentioning this last time. Maybe what do you think now about that?
Yeah, it was mostly for endpoint slice controller concern. That's
yeah.
IP to select.
So endpoint slice. Why would the endpoint slice care here about this?
Because if you select a secondary network, then you need to know which IPs you want to take.
No, that wasn't that, Lionel. So basically, those IPs are on the resource claim, because you have to have individual IP, not all of them. This is ranges. I was
right. Yeah. For example, in Ericsson before, I was doing load balancing and no NATing, so I add the VIP addresses or the service IPs directly in the pod. And when I was doing my endpoint slice controller, I didn't want to select the service IP. I wanted to select the pod IP itself. And so at the end, I had some IPs that I didn't want to select from my endpoint slice controller.
So this sounds like just your way of implementing things, right? So I'm not sure whether that can be. So what I'm feeling to what you, because you mentioned endpoint slice, so this is where I'm a bit confused, and let me maybe how I'm seeing endpoint slice. So endpoint slice controller today, based on the selectors, right? And we want to add a new selector to endpoint slice, right? Which is the pod network, right? So what it will pick is a subsection of pods that, by the way, keep in mind that those there can be multiple pods connecting to a specific network, but I want to pick a subsection of those. Plus, I want to make sure that from those pods, I do pick, the BlueNet, the data plane interfaces. And then basically how I do it is I go to the resource claims, and based on this, let me go back to share this tab because this is very helpful. So based on this, I go to my resource claim and I look at my devices and I search for for the devices that have this network in this case is Blue Network now, and then I pick the IP.
Mm-hmm.
That's how endpoint slice know, okay, this is the IP I need to pick, and I create an endpoint slice out of the IPs from those conditions, right?
Right. And what I mentioned is that
mm-hmm.
this IP should belong to this pod IPs or the CIDR that we had in the status. But I mean, I don't.
So that's an additional validation. What you're saying?
Yeah, it's additional selection. Yes, but it's I don't have.
No. Why selection? Because validation, fine, but selection, I'm confused about selection.
Because you pick only the IPs that belongs, or you put only in your endpoint slice you put only the IPs that belongs to at least one of these CIDRs that you have in your network.
So why would you have here IPs that don't belong to it? That's the implementation question, because that's my problem with what you just said is you might have some different IPs here that are not part of the pod network. How is that possible?
In my case, I was adding service IPs here.
You were adding. Why would you add service IP here?
Because I needed service traffic to be considered as local traffic. I was load balancing, and from outside of the cluster, the traffic was coming in. The load balancer was doing his job without any NATing or anything, and it was directly forwarded to the pod. So the pod has to consider this traffic as local traffic. So I was adding the VIP address as local address for every pod that I had.
Oh, I see. So that, but then why would you need that inside here, inside the resource claim? It's because of the function of you list all the IPs of the interface. Is that right?
Yeah, right.
I see. I see what you're saying. Yeah, I now understand. I know where you're getting with all this. I know what you mean by that. So basically, you want to have so because there are two aspects you're covering, and maybe this is something that we need to split this apart. You want to have serviceability, and then what you want to do have a pass-through serviceability. So no NATing in any way, right? So that's the two things you're trying to handle this, and then from that you would want to pick what's what. This is very specific for this. I wonder whether this can be handled differently. So
a new endpoint slice controller that like fetch.
So you can go by different. Considering what you want to do, Lionel, you have that information in your selector. So think of the and this is because you create your own endpoint slice. So this is where you could do that. Endpoint slice controller today as well takes service into the account, right? Into the whole thing. Because it has to capture the labels, the label selectors, right? If you have that, this is where the service is. Service IP, sorry. So basically, if I know that I can add a service IP into the resource claim, my endpoint slice controller can get that IP from the service itself and make sure that I will not pick that.
Yeah, but you can have multiple services.
Oh, I see. That's a fair point. Yeah.
I mean, I don't have strong opinion. I was doing something similar before, but I don't know if you want to cover this.
So this is a very because what you're doing is you're conflating multi-network with how you do service, right? Maybe differently, how you are enabling just the simple multi-homing pods with serviceability. You put that implementation into this, which is maybe fine. I'm not sure whether it's good or not. I would, at least in what we do in our case, we separate those completely, right? This part is only about like pod stuff. If I want to add an IP onto this interface to support what you just called out, I would just do it without this knowing about this, because why would it have to, right? Unless that's my thinking. Or you can, because what you could do is exactly what I'm calling out, right? Unless you have to explicitly know that, oh, what are all the IPs on the interface? Considering this is, oh, and keep in mind that this cannot be together with the claim, because that kind of locks it. You see how I can add service at any point to any pod.
Yeah.
This
No, I mean,
that, right?
Yeah, I mean, with Motus, it's different, but yeah, I forget with resource. That's why I mean, I don't do this anymore, and I don't have strong opinion.
So your problem, I just found that one big right thing where means I have to identify when from the get-go from the creation of the pod, I have to identify when the service is there. And I'm trying to, I am digging into this, Lionel, to kind of see if there's a better way, but this is a very kind of, you see how kind of not the way the serviceability would expect it to be done, right?
Yeah, it's very strange case, I would say. Yes.
Yeah. So, all right. So then, if it's only for that, then I feel we can. So that's not we're losing that argument, right? For having the ranges right there.
Yeah, and so at the end we would not have anything in the pod network except maybe the condition, or because
that's what it boils down to, right? It's basically it will boil down to having a better definition of this.
Because okay, last week or 2 weeks ago I posted this meeting notes, and sorry I could not join, so I could not present it then. I realized that I forgot one of the points that has been discussed, and I don't remember so much this point, but I can try to interpret what I remember. It was about network class and not having a pod network object instead. Because now what we are doing is just to refer to an external object. And I can pass maybe an example of how it could look like. So if we have this network class and we don't put the name inside, we just put the kind, then we can say we don't have this redirection towards another object. Like we don't have this duplicate pod network and user-defined network.
Oh, I see.
Even pod network, and then when in the service or network policy or anything, we will refer to this network. We will say network. We will say the class, and we will say the name. So this will point to the real object that will.
My problem, you have two fields. That's my problem with this.
Which one?
That you have two fields. So imagine this versus versus if you were to have, because no, this is a good thing. If I have this versus this.
Yeah, I understand the thing.
So this is one or the other, right? So this looks very simple, right? Now I have to have a struct, right? Yeah, or that's or then you have to. I don't think people like that, but or maybe add something. Maybe that could be that.
It's just to avoid having this duplicate object, because this pod network will be there only to integrate with the core Kubernetes networking objects. So we remove this and we keep only some network class that will be created only once by the cluster admin, and then the user will define their network.
No, but we lose the capability of integration with the array. How would we, with this approach? Okay, now I have a network class. And then, so how
the
do
rest
I?
of the rest of the mechanism would work in the same way, right?
Oh, so the array looks at, do I have for, so the array looks at the
Like,
driver, looks at the classes, right? Is what you're saying? And it will watch all these objects then. That's the problem. Is that the problem or not? Maybe not. So I'm going back. Let me get back to this guy here, right? So our DRA driver now. Let me maybe, because maybe that's a good idea what you just showed there. It simplifies things, right? So that's the point of this. So basically, instead of having all, let's keep all these things. Let me just clean those a bit. So,
and I think that's what had been discussed during KubeCon, but I was not fully understanding at that time. But I think that
so
was
we would
the idea,
have
the idea that I remember.
multi-network class. Let's say this, and then this is, you say this is just kind, right? Kind, and then let's say this is my, let's say pod network, right? And then what happens is this guy, what we need. This is my Plu network. This has all the, this is basically my implementation specific thing.
Yeah.
And what you're saying is then if I have a class, because I can do this, right? And then the Blue network is still, so the name is, what is it? Pod network, right? And this doesn't have any highlight. Oh, what did I do? Is it here? Yeah, no. Okay, never mind. Oh, it's here. Too many options. Okay, so we have this guy here now. Border code. So we have the class that then defines what to watch. I don't feel this is needed then, or maybe it is. I'm not sure whether this is needed, right? Let's think. I think maybe it's not. Then we have our pod network, right? Then we define the array, right? So the array sees this. Okay, I need to watch as well. Why do we need the class then? Because this is where I'm confused. Because we don't need the class then at all. Why do I need a class? Why do I need this object for? I feel like if we're pushing it that far, right? I can
because otherwise you cannot say that, okay, this is compliant with like service. I mean, it implements services and network policies and stuff like that.
We can assume there needs to be an object with this name. That's what I'm trying to. If we are saying that we can put an at or even like a class there, this is where we're basically, because it's a name, right? And what the endpoint / controller will look at is just this. So basically, if we standardize that you have to have this guy, where you get it from and how you define it, it's up to you. But the pod network key has to be there, right? So that I can put it in, right? If that's the case, then yeah, where it comes from, you can take it out of thin air. From you drive it, right? That's a fair point. You see that, right? Because I can have my own implementation, network X, right? Red network, which is my own kind. My driver understands that and fully interacts with just that. And then it just puts the pod network. So the only thing we standardize on is this key, right? We make it a standardized key in the array. And then maybe we expand network data with this field as well here. And that's it. And then the endpoint / controller has the full view and understands what's what.
The only problem is that if you have two implementation, they can be pod network OV Kubernetes, pod network CM, and they have the same name.
Yeah, we get some static from from you, Lionel. I know your audio broke. It was good.
Sorry. Yeah, I was saying if there is two pod network that are from two different implementation, they can have the same name.
No, that's fair. You don't have any standardization. Unless it's me.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can somehow, but yeah, you generate something. I think anyone else hearing this, or this is just me?
No, it's also a bit staticky for me.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, you generate some static, Lionel. I think so.
Okay.
That's a fair point. So having the object, so the class, you're saying the class will be the differentiator or something for just that piece.
Yeah. I don't know if you can hear me better now, but
no.
Okay.
Something happened. It was good. It's just like a few minutes. You started doing that for the last few minutes.
Yeah, I haven't changed anything.
Oh, now it's good.
Okay. Yeah, if you have two implementation and you have two objects, I don't know, UDN and user-defined network and CM pod network, they can have the same name. So this must be avoided.
But then the problem is this, right? So I think this is where then how we want to reference it, right? At the end. Is that notation fine? I don't feel like it is. Then we would have to have the struct, right? But then the trade-off of this versus this, I like the trade-off of that, right? This is so simple. And yeah, object. There is not even, you don't need any object reference. Basically, this just defines kind, right? You don't need this at all, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't I don't know if we need any other field in the future. I don't know.
Yeah. So network class just defines what sort of implementations there might be, right, in the cluster. So classes, right, of this whole thing. And then it points to a specific kind, and maybe versions. Probably might need to have version as well. Something like that. Then there is no condition. This defines just the class, and then only boils down to how we reference it in objects. Thoughts? Any other comments? I think we're getting to the same thing. I think the functionality is, I think, the same, right, Lionel? I'm seeing it. It's just
the condition is not there anymore.
Yeah, we don't see any, but it's not needed, right? This is so simple.
Yeah.
And basically that simplifies it a lot, right? We just define the class and then we just reference it, right? And then here we expect always to have if we go by this, right? We always expect at. So
yeah, or a slash or anything else.
Yeah, exactly. To identify which network you have in mind. Is that a big deal, requiring this? That's the question, because now I need to know of what type the network is every time for any reference for everything. Okay, something to sleep on. I think we are almost at a time, but I think this is I like this, to be honest with you, because this is very straightforward, right? And that's quite appealing, right? Yeah, this one is, has the reference and has all those kind of what you just said, right? Why do I need to create an object per this, an object for the other guy, right? Where basically this I can have inferred linkage. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, this network class express that this kind is a network that is recognized by Kubernetes also.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. Any other comments?
The multi-network class proposal, if I understand it correctly, it would still support potentially different providers running concurrently, right? Maybe
Yeah,
if I
you will
have
have
OpenK with Cilium CNI as chaining, I would have like one network class for OpenK and then another one for Cilium. And
yeah,
depending,
so that's the point, right? You will have one of those. Let me give an example. And you will have another one which will be, let's say,
and they could coexist in the same cluster.
And perfectly fine if the what was, I think I saw there was some ISO.
ISO pod network is the current one, yeah.
Yeah, the current name, where was that?
Yeah, and this is just to this is just installed with your CNI or with your implementation of networking.
Yeah, seems pretty minimalistic. I like it.
Yeah, I think it's isovalent, right?
Yes.
Pod network, right? So this is what it looked like, right? And then basically here your add changes, or yeah, this is how you notate that is something when you have to work, but that's the trade-off, right? Quite, I'm not sure whether it's a big or low trade-off, but this is awesome. I do like that because you just create those guys and you define that. Okay, I have that. Yeah, that's how you define your implementations in the cluster. And then yeah, you get rid of the provider and the conditions. And then when you point to the name, add something, right? And you expect that to be there. And this just boils down to the pod network label on the resource claim, right? We don't. So does the OVN matters here? Because then what we have to specify, this name has to be matching to whatever is in the pod network, right, as well, for the name duplication, right? So let me see here. Share this tab. I'm gonna be back here. So basically the name has to be as well here the same way, right? When you think about it, right? This has to be
it's or yeah, or a new field or the format.
Yeah. Same thing, right? So we need to,
yeah.
but that has to change, right, as well then.
What has to change?
What is the value? That the value includes the encodes the class.
Yeah, right.
That's what I mean here. Yeah, I think that's a thing. And now that got me thinking, maybe we can make the pod network as an extra field in the network data. I wonder. Something that probably after, if we identify what the class is and we approve this, I think we can then try to push for that. What do you think? Here we would push for standardized name, so it will not be an example DRA, it will be just K8AO. I know there is an effort to provide like standardized names, attribute names, so we probably could push for pod network. And then maybe push a field here into network data so that we don't have to this trick here. What do you think?
Yeah, I feel that because this is still like a third-party repo, and
I see what you're saying. This is core versus core. Yeah, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the device that you have in the status is always pointing to a device that is in your resource slice. So you can always do you can always fetch, okay, this belongs to the network. Just you have to go all the time in the resource slice and say, okay, it belongs to this.
I see what you're saying. Okay, fair point. Okay, so let's maybe that's maybe that part no, but I think this is the standardized keys here. I think the DRA probably would be open for that. I think I would like to, we are at the time, but next week, let's try to revisit this screen here. I would like everyone to think about this if they can, or I would like to see if today's state of the array or where it's heading, or we all know more about it, more or less. It's more mature. Should this picture change in some ways? Right? Is there anything we can do better, or should we do something differently about the DRA integration, right? I just want to make sure that we are sure on that. And lastly, about the class, let's sleep on it till next meeting. I think, let me see, 23rd. So because about that, should we cancel? It's a holidays week, so I think anyone.
I would not be joining this meeting, so.
Yeah, so that's a 31st December. Should we cancel it? I think we should, right?
Sounds good to me.
So the first share this tab, and let's go back here. Let me just add it here.
I can try to redraw a picture and try to summarize both ideas of pod network and network class, and try to make something a bit more clear, because now it's only
yeah. Those are just notes. Yeah. Fair point. Yeah, let's have that. Let's think about this and see what people thinks about that. And yeah, let's get back in January and continue this. Thanks, everyone. Happy holidays for everyone. A happy New Year.
Thank you. You too. Have a nice evening. Vacation. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.